Yep. My name's Idris Watts, and I am originally from Kent, Maidstone, and I accepted Islam in 1998 when I was studying Arabic studies at Leeds University, and then I went to live in Morocco from the age of 18, and I came back when I was about 29, focusing on, I was teaching English language there and studying Islam. And then I came back, and my main focus, I've taught in madrasas, but now my main focus is teaching adults Quranic Arabic. I became Muslim when I was 18, studying at Leeds University. The story goes, and this is the succinct version, is I flunked my A-levels. I was supposed to be doing ancient history at Leeds University. The only reason I wanted to go to Leeds University because I was the last year in which we still received a grant, like a maintenance grant, and all our fees, student fees were paid for. So my whole goal was just to get away from my hometown, get away from my family, go with all my mates to Leeds, because Leeds was the up and coming like city of the north. It was like taking over Manchester at the time. And the only reason I wanted to do ancient history because I thought that ancient history would mean I could become an archaeologist like Indiana Jones. I mean, that was my line of thinking when I was that young. So I messing around, I flunked my A-levels, so I phoned up the university in panic and said, give me anything. And they said, all we can offer you your grades are Russian, Chinese or Arabic. So I asked them, does the Arabic have some sort of history element to it? And they said yes, and I went, oh, give me that then. So then I ended up in Leeds University, seeking all that independence, and once I got the independence, I was miserable. Got into the Arabic department for the first time, met Asian Muslims for the first time, and I saw guys with beards, women with scarf on their heads, and I thought this was an Amish farmers convention. I was just like, it was completely culturally like ignorant. I thought if I look at one of the women, maybe that guy's got a saber. He's going to pull out, and chop my head off. And I knew nothing about Islam. So then very soon into the course, I started realizing that I was awful at Arabic, and then my life was just going down. And I was so ignorant about Islam that our first dissertation we had to do was Muhammad more successful as a politician or as a statesman or a prophet? And I thought they were talking about Muhammad Ali the boxer. That's how bad I was. So there I was, thinking, what am I doing? Where am I going? And then one of my friends hung himself, like an old friend from school, and he was sort of going in the same trajectory as I was in life. And I thought, I need to get some sort of balance in my life, something to give me some sort of grounding. So I asked them. There was a convert Muslim from Liverpool there who was on the course with me, and I asked him, does your religion give you some sort of peace? And he says yes. And I says, well, let's have a go then. So I ended up accepting Islam very soon after. And then I just flourished in the Arabic course. I suddenly became the best student, from the worst student to the best student in a very short space of time. And then I was very fortunate that year. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf Hanson had his the Deen intensive. They do the Rihla. It was in Morocco, Fez that year, and I was going to be studying in Morocco that year. So I thought I'd go there early in the summer, and that completely changed my perception of Islam, and my life changed from then on. Obviously, you can look at it in terms of the Prophet ﷺ came from an environment that was hardly exposed to the other cultures, yet he came with this book. How was this man who was unlettered able to produce this work that was, that he was inspired with it, and he had no real deep, meaningful interaction with the Jewish community and the Christian community when this revelation was coming to him. So you can approach it from that aspect of how on earth, how do we explain this historically that he came with this? That's one angle. And what I like to do in the course that I teach is like how to show people how succinct the Arabic is, but how much meaning and depth it has. And when you realise that, you realise what a miracle is. I mean, I was just speaking to someone just recently, and they were talking, and we were talking about how publishing a book so difficult. And I published a book a few years ago on the names of the Prophet ﷺ, and we had to re-edit that over and over again. It was a nightmare. I kept finding mistakes after mistakes after mistakes. And this friend of mine was remarking about Imam Shafi'i when he was writing his book. He kept re-editing until finally he just said, I'm not attempting it anymore. Why? Because I've realised that there's the only book that's infallible, that has no mistakes in it, is the Quran. And that's what's so amazing about this personality that came in that environment to produce this work that still has people, dumbfounded, still has people drawing meanings from it even to this day. And I say that to people, it's like people can criticize scripture, but a book that's hold weight for centuries and people have based their civilization around it, there's got to be something to it. And obviously the Prophet ﷺ's, this message he brought changed history. I mean, he brought the world from the classical period into basically, when you look at history, it's really fascinating because they say in the 5th century, was a time where there was a shift historically, where the classical cultures, the Chinese culture, Indian culture, Persian culture, the Greek culture, it sort of just, there was a complete lull as if it was collapsing. And there's this burst forth, and in one historian mentions that at this time in the 5th, 6th century, there was this impetus towards monotheism that was unprecedented in history. This push for this message of one God, and this sort of impetus of cultures reaching out and bringing other people to that message. And he said that was the only time in history that's really happened like that, on that scale. And what was happening in at that time, that we realised that this personality, he just changed the face of history, and he moved it from the classical period to the pre-modern era. Like they say, this period where it was from 5th century up until about 14th century, and then we've got European Enlightenment. So I see the Prophet ﷺ with his message was the impetus in order to move the world history into the period that we have today, really. And that's what's so miraculous about it. The most important thing here is that I don't believe that this is our real dilemma as Muslims in England, is that the lingua franca of our religion, like our community, is Arabic when it comes to the religion and our religious rights. And a lot now, I have teachers contact me that run madrasas, and they're saying we really need more books to help these children connect to what they're reciting in their prayer and so forth. So it's really important they have some sort of connection to the Arabic language, or a teacher that can at least show them appreciation if they can't access it directly. That's why I devised this course. I run the Quranic Arabic course connecting to the Quran, which you can access if you go to the QuranicsCircle.com. There's all information about it there. Is that once they start tasting the Arabic language and why Allah's used certain words over others, why has He placed this particular word in this part of the verse, people really just get an emotional attachment to the Quran and realise its beauty. I mean, in my course, I've got young girls there of 13 years of age on the course, and it's really amazing to see them, that it really enables them to engage and appreciate the beauty of this book. And that's what we need, is this is the problem that we have now, is that I rant about this a lot. I say academic Islam won't save our faith. Okay, there needs to be an emotional element, like people really realise this is amazing, and that gives them that wow factor about their religion. And so that's what I try to do when I'm teaching the Arabic, is when they're reading the Quran, to appreciate it from a linguistical point of view. Whoa, that's amazing. And so when you're reading the Quran, you're just opening up emotionally to it, and you're ready to appreciate all its beauties and the little pearls that within it. And so I think this is the way forward, really, for our youth to connect to the Quran. What translations do I like out there? I mean, it depends. That completely depends on the persuasion of the person. So some people really appreciate, for example, Aisha Bewley's translation. Other people like a more classical sort of approach, like Arbery. They like Arbery's language. Personally, I really appreciate. It's been it's been a controversial book recently, but I really appreciate the study Quran. The translation itself, I don't think it's the best translation, but the commentary is really helpful. I mean, give or take, as I said, people have a few issues with it, but as on a whole, it's really a beautiful means for people to, and non-Muslims as well, to really appreciate that the Quran isn't what they think it is. And so, when people ask me that question, I look at their background and what's suitable for them. Yeah, this is a debate. This is a question that's always raised. I mean, my personal feelings on this is I don't see, and as I said, this is just my take and feelings about it. I think this will naturally happen organically. I don't think people have to sit around a table and devise what is Islamic is British Islam, because the problem with that it just becomes divisive, and everyone has their people just get caught up in their own agendas. And I think the most important thing is not to find a British Islam. I think the most important thing is for individuals to find themselves and their own identity. And me personally, I think the most important thing to do that is to travel and go see the world, like live outside your context. My greatest concern, and I'm speaking specifically from the Asian community because I live amongst them, is my concern is the ghettoization of our community, so they only feel comfortable within their own. And for our future as Muslims in England, that's very dangerous because it feeds the fear of the wider community that these people don't want anything to do with us. They're not contributing to society. They do hate us. They don't want anything to do. They feel we're inferior. Do you know what changed my life? It's when I went as an 18, because this is my reality. As an 18-year-old boy, I didn't relate to England at all. I'd support Romania over England at the World Cup. Then I went to Morocco. This was so strange. I went to Morocco and I lived there. I lived it rough. I lived amongst locals that in some areas we would go to, and I'd spend time there where there was no electricity, no heating, and these people were dirt poor. I had one friend, he had hardly anything to eat, so he basically had a sparrow and with a razor blade slit its throat, and that's all he had for. So I saw poverty there, families living in one room together. And then what else was strange about Morocco was Fez specifically is a city rooted in Islamic culture. It's got rich history because of Maulana Idris that came from the Arab Peninsula and established a Sayyid dynasty there. It's very proud of that heritage, and it has a huge tradition of scholarship there and Islamic culture. And so and it's an ancient city, Fez. It's like one of the most oldest, well-preserved cities in the world. So I lived amongst that, and I just became passionate about that culture. I wanted to learn the history. I used to go around and find out where someone was buried or some place of historical significance. And I became so attached to that culture. This was what's strange. Once I had done that and I came back as a 28-year-old, I became passionate about my identity now as a Muslim in England and trying to find things that were historically relevant in English culture that I would have never been interested in before. In the most unlikeliest of places, Little Keighley, because Keighley is listed as one of the most one of the 40 dullest towns in England. And I became really fascinated with Keighley because it had this history of religious communities. It was the first spiritualist church. They had their first church there. We had so many Christian denominations. We've got a Buddhist group there. And what I found so amazing about Keighley was the Temperance Hall that's right in the centre of the city, which was trying to fight the alcoholism in the working class. They were addicted to gin because it's so cheap to access, and their living conditions were very poor. So people were getting really drunk. They were abusing drink and really affecting the families. So there was this temperance movement, and specifically in Keighley, they set up a temperance hall to try to get people to come forward to give their vows that they would never turn back to alcohol. And now it's Wetherspoons. You know, you've actually got this temperance thing. And so I'd come round and just note all these historical things, and I feel a real attachment to the city. Why did that happen? I think it's because I stepped out of my culture, be able to appreciate another culture and come back and then synthesize that. And I think what if we stay within our own comfort zones, it's only going to be detrimental to ourselves. And I think a natural British Islam, British and Muslim identity would develop if people start discovering themselves and appreciating who they are, their culture. As Asians, I think that's very important that they have pride of their culture, but also that they have their pride here. I mean, I consider myself English, Moroccan, Pakistani. I mean, that's how I look at myself. The thing that we need most in our community is mentorship. Yeah, as I said, academic Islam is not going to save the faith of our youth. I mean, what's most important is they have young guys that have got their religion working in their lives, and they're proud of their identity as Muslims and have love of the Prophet ﷺ, that they see that as well. When I was growing up, my parents tried to force me to be Christian, and I didn't have any any sort of inclination to continue being a Christian after I left my family. But the one thing I did respect was my church, my youth leaders, because that's what's so important, that our youth see that. And those youth contextualize, and the young people can contextualize the Prophet ﷺ's teachings in the day-to-day. It's not just about dressing like the Prophet ﷺ. I'm not dismissing that, I'm not belittling that, but the priority and focus should be on how did his teachings have an impact, and how are they relevant today? And just to make people feel like wow about him. Just like a simple example here is like intermittent fasting. If you talk about now, they talk about how the importance of intermittent fasting, and the person that devised this intermittent fasting, he fasted twice a week, Mondays to Thursdays, because he said he heard the Prophet Muhammad did that, and to show how, look at the impact he's even having today, the Prophet ﷺ, how historically he moved world history from a classical period to the post-classical period into inspiration for the enlightened period, to show how he's relevant, because Muslims today, they feel inferior to a certain extent, a lot of people, and they feel, because we're being demonized, that we're always on the back foot and feeling very insecure about ourselves. And so we have to think, and hang on a minute, the Prophet ﷺ was one of the catalysts that brought what we have today. And then simple things like, why do we fast? We fast. What does it teach us? It teaches us self-control, discipline, which is like life skills that people need just to be able to be successful in their lives. So so every time we do something in our life, what's the relevance? And then you fall in love with the Prophet ﷺ. I say, people ask me, how do I be mindful in my durood, my salat on the Prophet ﷺ? I said it will happen naturally if you apply things the things that you've got working in your life that make your life successful, that make your life better. When you realise that they're teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, it's just a natural inclination to feel a connection to the Prophet ﷺ and want to feel grateful. It comes from the heart. It's not something that you have to cognitively, intellectualize. And so, and one of the so sometimes it's some of the most mundane things. We as a community, what did the Prophet ﷺ teach us? To use water when we relieve ourselves, when we go to the bathroom. I mean, even cultures today haven't come to that realization about the importance of removing bodily hair. These simple things. Look at this is 1,400 years ago. This person's telling us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how to do the most things you think so mundane that cultures today, who pride themselves as we're the first world, we're developed countries, and they haven't even haven't come to this recognition that you should be doing these things. And so on a day-to-day level, just instilling in our youth, look how amazing this is that we've got. And especially when they see that passion in their parents and in the young youth that they look up to, they will naturally have a love for the Prophet ﷺ that can be contextualized in the community that they're actually living amongst. What's the most important thing is, if a person wants to learn more about their religion, they attach themselves. What's the word? They connect with a community they can relate to. It's really important. It's not, I personally, I teach an I syllabus, and what I always try to instill in the students is, look, you're not coming here just to do a course. You're coming here to get access to people that you can relate to, who can help you. And that networking where you're connecting with people that when you've got problems, you know that they're going to give you answers that are reliable, that are based in tradition, but at the same time practical, and understanding your sensitivities. And then being around other people that are trying to implement these things in their life as well. That's the most important thing. We need to create community of people that are moving and wanting to do things, and that's why there's alhamdulillah, every community's got their own people that are doing that. It's really important you attach yourself to those sorts of people to keep yourself motivated, and that when you have questions, you've got someone that can give you answers that are practical and relevant for you. Dr. Sherman Jackson, because he's in the academic world and he's contextualizing things for us in the world and trying to form a Western identity for us as Muslims. One book that I think is really important to contextualize where we are at as Muslims is Destiny Disrupted by Tamim Ansari. One must-see movie is Finding Joe. It's a documentary on YouTube. Fez. Uh, Leg of lamb with roast vegetables. A counselling qualification that I want. Yeah. Well, obviously Abdullah Quilliam's probably very relevant for us. Probably Abdul Ghani Nablusi. The one at the moment probably there's Adil Salahi's. It's not bad, and then there's that new one, that Revelation, that's come out as well. One of my favourite scholars was Yahya ibn Mu'adh. He's got some very inspirational quotes. So his most famous quote is "Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu." Whoever knows himself knows his Lord.